What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the Cricut Icon 4. Now at this point at the end of 2022, I honestly wasn't expecting to see yet another Cricut Icon phone, but here it is. So I'm going to be going over my initial thoughts about it to help you decide whether or not it's the right phone for you. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and in case you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description as they come out, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. Now before we actually get into the phone itself, I want to take a look at what comes in the box. So it's pretty simple, there's not really a whole lot here. We got a typical quick start guide, safety information, charging cable, wall adapter, and then I almost forgot there's actually a SIM card removal tool taped right in here. But aside from that, and then of course the phone itself, that's pretty much it. Now with the Cricut Icon 4, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 269, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So in general, we got a pretty generic entry-level display here. In this general price range, pretty much every phone is going to have almost the exact same display. But that being said, it's really not bad for what it is. I mean, if you're watching the occasional video here and there, maybe playing a simple game like Candy Crush or Angry Birds, or browsing the web or using social media, for stuff like that, the display we get here is going to be perfectly fine. But of course, if you're expecting something like an AMOLED display, really sharp 1080p resolution, stuff like that, then you're probably going to want to spend a little bit more and get something slightly higher end, especially if you're just going to be on your phone a lot. In that kind of situation, getting something a little higher end is probably going to be justified. But if you're more of a casual user and you're not really going to be on your phone all day, then again, the display we're getting here is going to be perfectly fine. Now for storage, the Cricut Icon 4 is getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. So unfortunately, this is probably the worst thing about this phone, because at this point at the end of 2022, 32GB just really isn't a lot of space. Sure, if you're a really light user and you're barely putting anything on your phone, except for maybe photos and videos that you can easily put on a microSD card anyway, then you should at least get by with this phone. But if you're downloading apps and stuff like that, especially games that tend to take up a little bit more space, 32GB is going to fill up pretty quickly. To give you an idea of what this actually looks like, right now I really don't have a whole lot on this phone, just a few social media apps, streaming platforms, and a couple games. And as you can see, this is all using 71% of my total storage. So again, on one hand, if you're a really casual user and you only have a few apps and not really a whole lot else, then you will at least get by. But I feel like for the average user, you're probably going to want at least a few different apps and maybe some games and stuff like that. And in that situation, just keep in mind, the storage on this phone is going to fill up pretty quickly. And if you are using your phone a little bit more heavily, then I really wouldn't recommend a phone with this kind of storage. For security features, the Cricut Icon 4 does have Face Unlock, and we also got a fingerprint scanner right here on the back. So definitely nice to get both options here, because in a lot of really entry-level phones like this, you might only get one or the other. But let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, it works decently well. And again, this phone does have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, there's honestly really not a whole lot to see. Up front, we got a typical water drop notch for the selfie camera. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a single 13 megapixel rear camera. So again, really not a whole lot of features. Unfortunately, there's no ultra wide camera or macro camera. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, this is definitely not going to be the phone for you. In addition to this, when it comes to the quality, although considering this is my first impressions video, I haven't actually used the camera yet, I'm honestly not really expecting a whole lot, because keep in mind, this phone retails for around $100. I personally got it for $60, and with such a low-end phone, really if you're taking lots of pictures and the camera is important to you, I would definitely recommend getting something a little bit higher end with a better camera. But if you're just taking a couple photos here and there, maybe for something like Snapchat for example, where the photo quality isn't super important, in that kind of situation, I imagine it will at least get the job done. But again, for more serious photography, maybe you want to get a nice picture or two to share on social media for example, in that kind of situation, if that's really important to you, I would definitely recommend spending a little bit more and getting a phone with a better camera. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the Cricut Icon 4, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A22 processor. In general, well, to be fair, since again this is a first impressions video, I haven't really used the phone a whole lot. It's pretty much what I expected for a $100 phone. On one hand, yeah, it's definitely not fast at all, and if you're going to be on your phone all day doing stuff like web browsing, social media, streaming a lot of content, and doing mobile gaming and stuff like that, if you're really going to be using your phone heavily, then yeah, you're definitely going to want to get something a little bit higher end that's quite a bit faster. But if you're really just looking for a phone for the bare minimum and you're not really going to be on it a whole lot, for more basic tasks, it will get the job done. Now I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on it, And here are the scores I got. What I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone's going to be an upgrade or a downgrade. But in general, I feel like if you're looking for a phone in this price range, performance is probably not going to be super important for you, and I feel like compared to pretty much any phone made in 2022, this phone is probably not going to be an upgrade. But that being said, again, for more basic daily activities, if you're really not looking to upgrade per se, but you just need a phone for the bare minimum, well, this phone again is definitely not a fast phone by any means. For more light use, it still will get the job done. Now for the battery, the Cricket Icon 4 has a 4000 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. So honestly, for what it is, the battery we're getting here is actually pretty decent. Sure, compared to something like a Samsung Galaxy A series that has a 5000 mAh battery, the battery life you get with this phone is not going to be nearly as good. But if you just need a decent battery that works, then keep in mind, while the Cricket Icon 4 doesn't have the best battery in the world, it still is decent, and I feel like for most people it will be perfectly fine. And as far as the charging goes, 10 watt fast charging is definitely not the best fast charging out there, but in my experience so far, the charging speeds have been pretty good. Now for the software, the Cricket Icon 4 does have Android 12, which granted isn't Android 13, but considering again this is pretty much just a $100 phone, it is nice that we're getting something at least decently newer. In addition to this, one really cool thing about this phone that's actually pretty unique for the price range is that it does have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you'll be happy to know you actually can do that with this phone. I was actually really surprised by this, because while we're starting to see more and more phones that have that feature, when it comes to the really low-end phones like this, it's definitely not something you see every day. So just keep in mind, if you like to use tap and pay, you will actually be able to do that with this phone. But in conclusion, my overall first impressions of the Cricket Icon 4. Honestly, I was expecting this phone to basically be a carbon copy of the Cricket Icon 3, kind of like how the Cricket Debut Smart was with the Cricket Debut. But that being said, I was completely wrong, and actually pleasantly surprised by some of the changes here. Definitely my favorite thing about this phone has to be the NFC. Seeing that this phone is around $100, and again, I personally got it for around $60, that makes this the cheapest phone I've ever seen that has this feature. So if you are looking for something really affordable, but you also like to use tap and pay, that's definitely a really nice thing about this phone. I also really like the security features here. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head if the Cricket Icon 3 actually had Face Unlock, but regardless, not every phone in this price range is going to have both a fingerprint scanner and Face Unlock, so I can definitely appreciate that this phone does. That being said, I'm not too happy about the storage. At this point, now that we're almost in 2023, I feel like even in really low-end phones like this, 64GB should really be the bare minimum at this point. The performance is also a little disappointing because while on one hand I do understand this is a really low-end phone that's not really meant for heavy use, at the same time, it would have been nice to see a little bit of an increase in power. I mean, there are phones like the Samsung Galaxy A03s and A04s for that matter that are in the same general price range and have the same purpose as this phone, but those phones are much faster. So in general, even though I don't expect it to be super fast, having at least somewhat of an increase in power from the Cricket Icon 3 would have been really nice. But overall, at the end of the day, if you're looking for a really affordable phone for more basic activities and you don't really need any fancy features, I do think for what it is, the Cricket Icon 4 is a pretty decent option. Now once again, in case you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description as I make them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.